Like a garden snail leaves a trail behind, a story snail leaves a tail behind. Share our stories and you may find you can tell a story too.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another storytelling assembly, which is a special one because on the 22nd of March every single year it is World Water Day, a special day started by the United Nations for the whole world to celebrate the importance of water, especially thinking about getting water to places that don't have quite so much, like the countries of Africa. I wonder if you can think of some of the uses that water has in the world. I bet some of them might surprise you. I'm going to share with you a story now which is all about the different things that water can do. Let's see how many you can count by the time we get to the end of the story. There are 3 water droplets in this story: drip, drop, and plop. And they started their life in a cloud above a mountain in Montana. That's a place in the United States of America. They would dance around all day in the sky, enjoying the sun warming up their watery bodies. And their parents would watch them and say, "Drip, drop, plop. When will they stop?" Well, actually, the time came when they did stop, because their cloud got so full of water droplets, it began to throw them down onto the planet below. And as drip, drop, and plop zoomed down towards one of the mountains in Montana, they began to worry about whether they would get to stay together. The 3 of them hit the top of that mountain. Drip went off one way, drop went off another way, and plop went yet another. Now Drip bounced off the mountain and went hurtling down towards the ground. Drip, drop, plop. Where would he stop? I'll tell you where he stopped. He stopped in something really soft and brown and, well, full of worms. What would you call something like that? Drip had landed in some soil. And there he lay for a while, a lot colder than he had been in the cloud, until he came across something white and furry. And that white and furry thing sucked him inside, and he began shooting through all of these dark, white, furry passages. Drip, drop, plop. Where would he stop? I'll tell you where he stopped. He stopped inside something tall, with a thick, round, brown trunk, which stretched branches into the sky, and covering those branches were nice, beautiful green leaves. He'd found himself in a tree. He waited in those leaves, enjoying the sun's heat once again. But Drip also had some important work to do in that leaf. You see, while he was there, he took some of the energy from the sun and passed it to the rest of the tree to give the tree life. And as he did that, the tree began to grow in its branches a shining green sphere. And Drip actually travelled into that sphere to keep bringing some energy, especially to that part of the tree. That shining green orb was plucked from the branches by a man with a thick grey beard who bit into it like this. Drip had been in an apple, only now he was in the part of an apple that was being chewed around the mouth of a man until he was racing down through the dark red channels of the man's body. Drip, drop, plop. Where would he stop? I'll tell you where he stopped. He now found himself inside a really pink and squishy part of the man that would get really squeezed and tight whenever the man picked something up, and then would relax whenever the man put something down. He had ended up in one of the man's muscles. And now he was still taking energy and giving it to the body to give it life. But he wasn't getting that energy from the sun. He was taking it from the food that the man ate. And he was putting it into the muscles so it could squeeze and relax. Squeeze and relax. Squeeze and relax. Squeeze and relax. It was very hard work and really, really hot, especially during the day when the man was doing a job on the farm. In fact, Drip began to get so hot that soon he found himself getting pushed out from the muscle and out through the man's skin. Drip, drop, plop. Where would he stop? I'll tell you where he stopped. He burst through the man's skin and was now running along between all of the hairs on his arm. He'd become the man's sweat. And after running along the man's arm, taking away some of the heat from the man's body, he started to fall down to the ground. He landed on a hard grey piece of land and began to run through a gutter until he came to a drain. And now he was racing through dark grey channels. Drip, drop, plop. Where would he stop? I'll tell you where he stopped. He burst through with loads of other water droplets out of the drains and into an ocean called the Pacific. And there, surrounded by so many water droplets, he looked for his friends, Drop and Plop. But he couldn't see them. And as he looked at the sun, he thought to himself, what is Drop doing now? Well, Drop had bounced off the side of that mountain in Montana and started rushing down, rushing through the sky. Drip, drop, plop. Where would he stop? I'll tell you where he stopped. He found himself inside a big tank full of other water droplets, and somewhere down below came lots of heat. This was greater than the heat from the sun, and it made all of the water droplets around him get really excited, really excited. He and all of the other water droplets got so excited that they began to rush upwards so fast that when they hit a wheel, they brushed past it and the wheel started to move. In fact, the wheel moved so quickly that sparks of electricity flew out of it into wires rushing out of this place. You see, Drop had been in a power station. And now that he'd been heated up by the gas and made that wheel turn to create some electricity, he was thrown out of the power station, down another pipe and into a river. Drip, drop, plop. Where would he stop? Drop was now rushing around the river, and as the river wound its way across the land, Drop kept bashing against the land, bashing on this side, bashing on that side, and everywhere he bashed, he noticed that he tore a little bit of the land away, almost as if, bash, he was shaping the land. Bash, bash, bash. At last, the river slowed down. But just as Drop was getting his bearings, he found himself getting collected up in a huge bucket with lots of other water droplets, and that bucket began to chug along a road, carried on the back of a truck. Drip, drop, plop. Where would he stop? Well, as they were going along, Drop found himself getting whirled around and whirled around and whirled around. Whew, it got me quite dizzy. But as Drop was being swirled around, he began to notice bits of, stone mixing in with him and all of the other water droplets, until they had become something known as cement. When the truck finally stopped, Drop felt it sort of lean, and all of the cement rushed out of the truck and landed somewhere out in the open. It was very cold hidden inside the cement, and as he got a bit more energy from getting warm, Drop started to force his way through the stone until he was able to look down and see where he was, just in time for a wheel to go rushing past him. It was a girl riding a skateboard. The cement had been used to make a skateboarding park. Drop rather enjoyed resting on top of that skateboarding ramp watching the skateboarders zoom past him on either side. But after a while, more water droplets fell down from the sky, and they knocked him so that he began to roll down the ramp himself. Drip, drop, plop. Where would he stop? I'll tell you where he stopped. He burst out from the drain with lots of other water droplets into an ocean called the Atlantic. And as he swam about with the other water droplets, he couldn't see his friends Drip or Plop anywhere. He looked at the sun. He wondered what Plop was doing now. Well, Plop had bounced off the side of that mountain in Montana and was rushing down through the sky. Drip, drop, plop. Where would he stop? I'll tell you where he stopped. He landed in a long blue channel of water droplets, which we call a river. But this river was wider than the one Drop was going to be going down. In fact, it was so wide that there was space for things to rest on it. Things that could carry people and animals and food and other items. What would those things be, do you reckon? Eventually, Plop knew that they were called boats. And as he spent time in that river, Plop helped many of these boats to move down that river, keeping them up, keeping them going along, until eventually he ran out of river and he came into a sea. A sea that is known as the Arctic. And as Plop lay there in the ice, it was so cold that he couldn't really move. And he looked up at the sun. He wondered what Drip was doing now. Well, as you know, Drip was in the Pacific Ocean, looking up at the sun and thinking about his friends. And as he did, he began to feel himself getting lighter. So light that as he looked below him, he realized he was flying, watching the Pacific Ocean zooming away below him. And as for Drop, well, he was in the Atlantic Ocean, looking up at the sun and thinking about his friends, until suddenly he felt himself getting lighter, and he looked down and saw the Atlantic Ocean zooming away below him. And as for Plop, well, there he was, frozen in the Arctic ice, looking up at the sun and thinking about his friends, when he realized he was getting lighter and able to move. In fact, he could look down and see the Arctic ice zooming away below him. Well, now they were up amongst the clouds. All three droplets danced about, so happy to be home again. And what do you know? Eventually, they found each other right above that mountain in Montana. So, how many things did you count water getting up to in that story? Maybe you can compare notes with your friends and grown-ups, see how many they managed to count. And maybe you can think of some uses for water that got missed out from that story. Or maybe you could put those ideas into a story of your own and send those to us so we can share that story in a future video. Don't forget to celebrate water on the 22nd of March, and especially think about those places in the world where they maybe don't have as much as you or me. Right now, though, it only remains for me to say cheerio, and I hope to hear your story soon. So, cheerio, and I hope to hear your story soon.